very dear to me, very sacred to me. There is no question of defacing it. It is only a question of defending it. And how? This is having said one idea, the another thing. My bill, Nani has anticipated because we had the privilege of discussing it and has answered, doesn't declare today that we want courts to take away any kind of fundamental right. The bill is not. I know the reply has been given. I have to make two serious submissions to you. The bill I have introduced before Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, is not a bill to amend the Constitution, though it sounds like that. The bill is not there as Nani. He had, three kinds of arithmetical propositions before you. Number one, 4 reasons for justifying the judgment. 6 objections, which were really an elaboration of the 4 justifications, but brilliantly done. And 3 articles of faith with him. Now really the first was the brilliant professor who gave the 4th. The second was the brilliant professor who elaborated on the first 4 and made them with a clever, casuistry, appear the 6th as if they are different from the 4th. And the third 3, which, made a passionate appeal by making, I think, trying to rouse something in you, which when once it is roused, then your judgment may be temporarily impaired. Fear he resorted to. Not pray may be good. How tempted one is to believe it. Even I may be, how dangerous it is. I even went the because everybody said that the one thing none of us can resist, Milton said, that last infirmity of the noble mind. Who can resist such savory things said about oneself in such a charming way before so distinguished an audience? But normally, Oscar Wilde may be right about surrendering to temptation. But sometimes some temptations must be resisted. And I am going to suggest to you that there is no more on my part to amend the Constitution of India. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the Constitution of India has been amended by a body which should not undertake the functions of legislation or amendment. I entirely agree with my learned friend Professor Palkhivala that there is a scheme in our democracy. There is the parliament, there is the executive, there is the judiciary. Each has its own well-defined field, and each shall be limiting his activities to that particular field. The executive shall be carrying out the policies approved by the Supreme Legislature of the country. And in the field of legislation, Parliament, as the ultimate legislature of this country, is supreme. In the field of interpretation and arbitration, the judiciary shall remain supreme. Parliament shall not try to arbitrate and to adjudicate. The Supreme Court, mutatis mutandis, must not try to legislate. We must not try to reserve one another's functions, but respect one another's legitimate, well-defined functions. I should resist in Parliament any effort made by anybody to try to usurp the functions or to weaken the authority of the Supreme Court. But with the same faith, permit my saying, I shall resist the Supreme Court trying to arrogate to itself, trying to assume, trying to take functions which the Constitution has reserved for the Parliament of India. If that be so, where do we get? I submit to you. From 1951 to 1967, February 26, the Constitution of India, as adumbrated in this document, as expounded by those who were making it, and as commented upon by the Supreme Court, had one particular meaning. This meaning was given to the Constitution by unanimity of judgment by the Supreme Court in what is known now as Shankari Prasad's case. In that judgment, the Supreme Court held, I'm not going to bore you, though the judgment is a lucid one, and the temptation with me is very great because I have those judgments before me. The Supreme Court held that Parliament has the competence, the right, and the authority. The proper word is competence, not right. Competence and authority to amend the Constitution of India, including every part of the Constitution. This judgment, given by the unanimous voice of the Supreme Court, was confirmed again by the Supreme Court in Sajan Singh's case. Then comes the Golaknath case. Till 1967, 26th of February, the Constitution under Article 368 very clearly stated, no doubt for any misunderstanding or any kind of second thought. There is one chapter in this Constitution of yours where the chapter is made of a single article, and the article and the chapter has one heading, Amendment of the Constitution. There is one single article in this chapter, and the chapter says very clearly that if the following things are observed, the Constitution of India shall stand amended. An amendment of this Constitution may be initiated only by the introduction of a bill for the purpose in either House of Parliament, and when the bill is passed in each House by a majority of the total membership of that House and by a majority of not less than 2/3 of the members of that House present and voting, it shall be presented to the President for his assent, and upon such assent being given to the bill, the Constitution shall stand amended. Now I want you to take note of this thing. Nowhere is a provision made in the first place that only some part can be amended. I will take now two things implicit in this. A, should a constitution be amendable or not? We have to consider this. I will take the specific opposition argument leveled by him. First, a constitution which is not amendable is a constitution which is in the process and the agony and the throes of death, decay and decomposition. I am submitting to you the necessity of continuously examining the need for amending the Constitution. And then only I will say what are we doing fundamental rights. The third point, who is amending the Constitution? Not I or somebody else. And who is that somebody else? And should that somebody else be permitted? Let us take this question one by. First, therefore, my point is the amendability of the Indian Constitution. Because he has raised some very valid points which is not sufficiently tested, will appear to you to be impregnable, inviolate premises, and therefore I have to test that. A, I submit the Constitution of India was intended to be amended by a simple process laid down in the Constitution of India in Article 368 of our Constitution. I claim this power for Parliament, and there comes to be any dispute. The Supreme Court says that you can amend every section excepting the fundamental rights. They are the entrenched clauses and they are inviolate. And in support of this, what is quoted is this, the beginning of the Constitution. I think there is a misrepresentation and a slight misreading. What is it in the first place? The Constitution's preamble begins, we, the people of India, give unto ourselves this Constitution. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day, November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. It was now said that this is the Constitution given to you by the people of India. Parliament cannot therefore amend it. Now let us see the fallacy. I am raising these arguments given by examining them and see how quickly one can prove that they are utterly fallacious. Though when heard without the scrutiny of real powerful arguments against them, one can be tempted to accept them as they were presented to you so lucidly. A, amendability. Felix Frankfurter I meant and I left. What has Felix Frankfurter to say in substantiation of what I have to say? This is it. The Constitution owes its continuity. The Constitution owes its continuity to a continuous process of revivifying changes. The Constitution cannot make itself. Somebody made it. Not at once, but at several times. It is alterable, and by that draweth nearer perfection, and without suiting itself to different times and circumstances, it could not live. Without adapting itself to changing circumstances, the Constitution shall not live. Its life is prolonged by changing reasonably the several parts of it several times. So wrote the shrewd Lord Halifax, and it is as true of our written Constitution, this is Felix Frankfurter saying, as it is true of that imponderable which makes the British Constitution. A ready and delicate sense of the need for alteration is perhaps the most precious talent required of the Supreme Court. In the first place, Felix Frankfurter agrees with me and with you, perhaps the majority of you, that a constitution must be amendable, and amendable by the supreme legislature of the country to meet the changing needs of society. If we accept that, Then we come to the second. Should the fundamental rights be amendable or not? Professor Palkhivala opposed that they cannot be amended. In the first place, he then tries, suddenly having said that, tries to raise the boogie of people coming and destroying your fundamental rights in a cavalier, irresponsible, flippant manner. I think this is best, in not his case, but in somebody else's cases, on utter ignorance of the fundamental rights that are enumerated in the Constitution. How many have been tampered with? Of the amendments, may I know how many have touched fundamental rights? Of the more than 20 amendments carried to the Constitution, 4 touch fundamental rights. 1, because of certain disability to which a very vital section of our community was condemned from Manu to your and my time, the so-called untouchable. There was no remedy unless the Constitution was amended to meet some justice to these people. Another, to safeguard the integrity and sovereignty of your country, because under the garb of fundamental rights, people were likely to preach the vivisection of India, the right to bring about the disintegration of India. I want to submit to you, there is no right to plead for the disintegration of this country, and under the garb of democracy we shall not stand by when people will work for this. This was done in this, he will agree with me, this was done in amendment number 16. Now, only 2 amendments, number 4 and number 17, deal with what? With basically 2 rights. In a remote manner, a fundamental right, but basically the right touched upon